You're listening to the Matador Beat.
Welcome, Red Raiders, to the Matador Beat. I'm Shannon Vargas, the Opinions Editor, joined by
Mateo Silas, the Editor-in-Chief of the Daily Toreador.
And Kent Wilkinson, Director of the Thomas J. Harris Institute for Hispanic and International Communication.
So this month is Hispanic Latinx Heritage Month, and it started yesterday, September 15th. This month is to celebrate and recognize achievements made by the Hispanic community. To kick this month off, I wanted to have a discussion with these two on why it's so important to recognize this month. So you all introduced yourselves, but what is your relation to Hispanic heritage? We'll start with Mateo.
Well, I am from Hispanic heritage lineage, so I'm basically the second generation born in America, since my grandparents moved here in 1920 to America to seek a new life and to hopefully raise a new family. And so, of course, they had my parents and they had me. So, and the Hispanic community has always been a big influence in my life just because I dance ballet folklorico. I used to do a little bit of mariachi back then. So it just used to be a lot of different activities involved in my life.
Okay, yeah, my heritage is not Hispanic Latinx, as you might have guessed from my apellido, right? My last name, Wilkinson. But actually, when I was probably about your all's age, I got very interested in Latin America through an interest in history and some undergraduate work I did. And I decided to do a master's program in Latin American studies just to learn more about the region and the culture and the language and all that. And had the chance to live in Peru for 6 months with my wife, teaching English and learning Spanish, and it just opened a whole new world to me. Felt very connected to the culture, which is kind of odd that I don't have that in my lineage. But since then, I've been doing research and teaching related to that area and international communication, and actually also lived in Monterrey, Nuevo León in Mexico for 2 years as faculty there early in my career, and also have lived in Chile, Santiago de Chile, for 6 months. So I have this connection with Latin America, Latin culture, U.S. Latinx culture that is a really important part of who I am now.
How would you explain Hispanic Heritage Month to someone that has no idea what it is?
Would you like to go?
Sure. It's a recognition of not only the past in terms of it being started by El Grito. We had the celebration here on Wednesday evening over at Urbanovsky Park, and it's not only fun in terms of food and entertainment and drink and all that, but very informative because there's a lot of history about the independence movements of the different countries that we celebrate. And so I think it's important to recognize that, but also the ongoing contributions that Hispanic Latinx populations are making to our society that they have been since before the founding, right? This was Mexico, before 1848 or so, and to recognize the ongoing efforts. And here in Texas, this year at some point, Hispanic Latinx population is going to be the largest ethnic group in Texas. We need to recognize that. We're fortunate to be working at an HSI, a Hispanic Serving Institution, and it's important that we recognize that, not to the exclusion of anybody else, but that the Hispanic Latinx students, faculty, staff, community make really important contributions to who we are and what we value.
Yeah.
You can even say that to the architecture of Texas Tech. It's from Spanish influence, from Latin America influence. So just even then, we have to recognize that Texas Tech is historically just been one of those Hispanic Serving Institute, even though until recently it actually was named. It's been in the Latinx community. A lot of people that here I went to school with always aspire to come to Texas Tech, just because of how influential it's not only here in the United States, but also in the broader regions, especially in Spain and now Costa Rica. So.
Right. Do you feel that, this is another just sad question from what you all are saying, but do you feel like Lubbock has become that community for Hispanics where, where can they go in Texas? Lubbock is the place?
From being born and raised from Lubbock, I absolutely think that it has increased over the past years. It has become one of those hot spots for Hispanic Americans to just come and actually be proud of who you are. I remember a few years ago, I used to just be very shy about my culture, and I always thought I was like, and I hate to say this, but I did frown upon of who I was. But then until I got into high school, I started seeing that everyone else in Lubbock were embracing their culture, because we have Latino Magazine, Latino Lubbock, and all these other news outlets and organizations, even newscasters now on TV, that I'm like, oh, it's okay to be who I am. It's okay to be Hispanic. Yeah. It's okay to embrace the really like amazing, beautiful, and colorful and vibrant aspects of my culture. So that's why I started getting into ballet, folklorico, and all this other stuff, because Lubbock did open up a little bit more, and I felt safe I could do that.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting what Mateo's saying about that sort of recognition and tie to the region. We did through the Harris Institute and Dr. Gabriel Dominguez Partida and Dr. Edoya Lola in classical modern languages and literatures did some research over the summer on language, identity, and media, and some of the media outlets that you mentioned are very important to that. But also, I spent some time at the Southwest Collection doing some historical research, because there's some really good oral histories there that were done back from the 70s up to, earlier in the 2000s. And some of the things you're talking about are really salient and have been for quite a while, in terms of wanting to have a place and sort of asserting your identity and feeling comfortable as a Latinx. And we were looking at language use, so, like speaking Spanish in public, and how do other people respond? How do you feel about yourself as a Latino, speaking Spanish, or maybe Spanglish, right? Doing some code mixing, code switching in public. And I think one of the conclusions is that it is a much more open environment than it used to be, historically, but that a lot of people in the community are still striving for more recognition and I guess more representation in leadership positions in the region.
Absolutely. And just on touching on the topic of actually speaking Spanish and that in the community, unfortunately, at the time when my parents came, and they were born here, but when they came back to Lubbock after moving to Dallas, my parents had me, and they decided not to teach me Spanish. Even though they understand and they can speak Spanish fluently, they decided that not to teach me Spanish because of the community. And well, now that's evolved more into where you can actually speak Spanish, and you are like looked on and amazed at, just because it's like it's something that is kind of dying within the Hispanic community here, especially in West Texas, because a lot of the parents just chose not to teach their children, because it almost set them apart from the culture we have here in West Texas. And now it's ingrained in the culture, so now it's like, oh, you're Hispanic and you don't speak Spanish? Right. Well, yeah, it wasn't my choice, but yeah.
And there were prohibitions, right? Children would be punished physically in school for speaking Spanish, or we heard a story of a student getting suspended for like 4 or 5 days for being caught speaking Spanish. And obviously, as a parent, you don't want your kid hit, and you don't want them suspended. You want them in school, and so it makes sense what you're talking about, Mateo, there. And we've moved away from that, but there's still some residual effects of it, like you're saying, of generations that know little Spanish or weren't encouraged to speak it, but there's still a lot of opportunity. You're a young man, and we have the Seville program and the Costa Rica program and a heritage Spanish program here in CMLL, so there's a lot of opportunity here.
Perfect.
What ways could students be more educated about Hispanic culture, whether that's at Tech or Lubbock in general, if there's like resources that students could go to?
Well, as an HSI, we're moving forward with some plans to actually develop a couple of new centers or institutes focused on Hispanic and also Mexican American culture. So keep an eye out for that and those sorts of opportunities. Our institute has been here as long as I have, for 15 years, and we've been very fortunate to have funding to be able to support research and scholarship and bring in speakers. Look for those sort of co-curricular events, not only courses that tie in Hispanic Latinx themes, but also the activities that are going on campus and in town related to that. And if I could make a quick plug for an event that we're actually having on Friday, September 17th at the Cinemark Movies 16, starting at 7 p.m. We're going to have a discussion and Q&A with Julio Ricardo Varela, who is a producer producer at Futuro Media, which does Latino USA on public radio and some other programming. And so it's going to be an opportunity to hear from him about Latinx representation, but also ask questions directly of, how do you get into the media? Why is this important? What are sort of the longer term implications of developing out that area? And then at 8:30, also at the Cinemark Movie 16, we're going to have a free screening of the film In the Heights. So we encourage you to come out and, take advantage of the opportunity to hear from a major Latinx media producer, but also see a great film and have a good time. Bring a friend out, and there should be plenty of seating. So we hope to see you there.
Yes, and of course, just always look out for events, not only on Texas Tech campus, but also around the community, because, of course, you're going to start seeing a lot of mariachi performances back up, hopefully a lot of ballet folklorico performances, and just other music that is inspired by the Hispanic heritage or Hispanic community or Latinx community, just going on around Lubbock. So just if you are interested and you want to, reach out to one of those people, reach out to one of the student organizations on campus, like the Hispanic Student Society, or even just reach out to one of their organizations within the community, such as LULAC or their subchapter LULAC Power 3, and just ask them. That's the best way to be educated, is just go out and say, like, hey, I don't know, can you help educate me? And more than often than not, we would love to educate you. We might cook you dinner. You never know what we might do.
I know that for a fact that LULAC is very interested in having younger membership. A lot of their membership are, folks from, I guess, like the Vietnam War era and that. And in order to keep these advocacy organizations vibrant and moving forward, they need to have that younger membership and participation. So please do look that up. And there's a local Mexican-American, Texas Mexican-American Chamber of Commerce chapter that's gotten started and is developing. So there's a lot of ways to contribute and to tie it in with whatever you're studying, right? This is something I talk about with students a lot. It's not just about learning for your profession and earning money. That's super important. But the skills that you're developing can be used in a pro-social way to help communities develop, help improve, the South Plains, West Texas, the country.
Right. So I'm really glad you guys said that, because I think, especially as students, we are afraid to ask those questions because we don't want to be offensive or, contradicting or whatnot. So it's nice to hear about those opportunities and centers that could possibly open up or that are in the works of opening up, as well as just looking at organizations that are welcoming. I think once that notation of, you don't know what you're talking about is past, and pushed past, then I think I don't want to say ignorance is gone, but people are more comfortable, and we get past those kind of microaggressions, and then we get rid of just ignorance per se. I'll just say ignorance. But I have another side question that kind of popped up. Would you say that Texas history is Hispanic history?
That's a good question. I would have to say yes to a degree, because there are some parts that, of course, Texas was Tejas, was part of Mexico. So we were a part of Mexico at one point. And then, of course, the United States came and took us and took Texas and all that. But I think there is a degree, but we also have to be careful of who's the sources for this, if we're going to claim it as Mexican-American history. Right. Just because history has shown that a lot of people like to whitewash history. So they would like to just glaze over some things that never happened, especially like the civil rights movement within the Mexican-American communities here in the United States was just kind of lost. Like, a lot of people don't know who Cesar S. Chavez is, even though we have streets named after him, even though we might have there's several communities around the United States that celebrate his holiday just because he was a big monumentous person within the community. So we just have to be careful.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Mateo's perspective, and I think there are multiple voices that need to be heard or known for the different cultures that have contributed to what Texas is. I teach a course in rock and roll media, and one of the things I try to stress is one of the reasons that Texas music is so rich is because you've had all these different influences, right, from the east in Louisiana, certainly from the African American population, a lot of influence like on guitar playing from Mexico and further south. So it's this really interesting mixing pot of different styles, and you can hear it if you listen carefully, particularly to Texas roots music, what they're drawing from. And I think the same, that's our history, right? That's a popular culture example, but those different cultures at different times have contributed a lot to the amalgam that Texas is now. And it's not to diminish sort of, the dominant population, which has been the European American. They made excellent contributions, but I think there needs to be a recognition that it's been a joint effort by a lot of different groups at different times. And, we as faculty get concerned when we see a potential restriction on that of teaching in such a way that some people don't feel comfortable. My view is if you're looking at history and you're not feeling a little uncomfortable, whoever you are, then there's probably something wrong with the way, the kind of material you're accessing or the way it's being presented, because there's a lot of really uncomfortable stuff that's happened in the past, and we need to recognize it. In the future, our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren are going to be looking back at this time and probably feeling some discomfort about some of the things that are dynamics that are going on, not only in Texas, but nationally in this time period. And so I think that's just kind of built into it, and we need to recognize it.
Right. So this is the last question, by the way. I'm a firm believer in educating beyond the designated month. So, with Black History Month and then Asian American Island Pacific Month, I always believe that we should be going beyond the month. So how, as a tech community, continue to show support and advocacy for the Hispanic and Latinx community?
I think just recognizing that, yes, we do have a month, September 15th to October 15th, but right after Halloween, we have the biggest days within the Hispanic community, just as El Dia de los Muertos and the 3 days of Day of the Dead that we celebrate. And in Mexico, it's something big, and my family used to celebrate really big by going to graves and all that, and El Paso has something really big. So just recognizing that there's more holidays within the Hispanic community and within all the communities that we should just keep an eye out, just do our research, do our history of why are they celebrated, why aren't they celebrated here, because Cinco de Mayo is not that big of a holiday in Mexico as it is here. So we just need to be aware of that, but also just continue education.
Right.
Yeah, I like what both of you are saying, that it shouldn't just be designated to a particular time. Yeah, maybe we give more focus to a particular group during a particular month. But I think it's incumbent on all of us to stay informed about, as I said before, all the different communities that contribute to our beautiful society. And that should be an ongoing learning process, not just, hey, it's October 15th. I don't need to think about Latinx issues for another year. I mean, we've seen with the pandemic, right, that, when the stresses and strains are on society, we see some of those inequities more starkly than we would normally. And I think it's important to keep up with news and developments with a variety of populations, but maybe giving them a little more time and effort during those celebratory months. And I'm really glad that we have those, and that Texas Tech does a good job, I think, of informing people about them and planning programming, like the event last night, but they're throughout the year for different groups on campus. I think that's a really important part of education.
I agree. I'm only a second year, but I think I have seen just a growth of diversity that Tech is trying to pull off, and it looks, to me at least, I'm like, yeah, I can see progress.
Absolutely. Because I am a junior, fourth year student here. But from where I was at a freshman to where I am now, we're celebrating so many different communities. And I'm so happy that we've seen this increase in diversity, equity, and inclusion from the office, both from Office of DEI and the Office of the President. and how they advocate for continued educations within the Texas Tech community. And I cannot be more happier and more proud to say that Texas Tech is my home sometimes.
Yeah.
That's great. And, I totally agree with that. And I think there's also more recognition and activity at the college level than there used to be. I know there is here in the College of Media and Communication, but my sense through contacts in other colleges is that there's more happening there as well, because it does go beyond, celebrating and recognizing contributions. It's about equity. It's about opportunity. It's about representation. And that needs to be an ongoing discussion and dialogue.
Well, that's all the questions I have. Does anyone have last remarks?
No.
No.
Thank you for bringing attention to this.
You're listening to a production of the Matador Beat.